The Zelda series is home to some pretty spectacular combat, along with some, relatively solid combat and, some pretty divisive combat. Today we're going to examine the intricacies and differences between different titles and attempt to answer the question that's about to interrupt this sentence. Ocarina of Time, released in 1998, you get the idea. It added Z targeting. For those of you not aware, Z targeting was activated by holding down the Z button whilst fighting an enemy, focusing the camera on that enemy so you didn't have to run around all willy-nilly hoping your attacks would actually make contact. Even though it seems pretty normal and mainstream today, the addition of locking onto your enemies single-handedly changed the way that games are played nowadays. And as such, Ocarina deserves a lot of credit for that. Despite lacking a lot of the fancy bells and whistles some of the modern entries have, Ocarina's combat became the standard for most future installments. You've got your basic slashes, your thrusts, side hops, backflips, the jump attack, along with the spin attack. Although, admittedly, that last one was introduced in A Link to the Past, it all comes together to create a very solid and enjoyable experience. It's simple, and that works very well in its favor. To this day, nearly all of the core mechanics still exist in even the most recent of Zelda games. So if Ocarina's combat was pretty good, how is Majora's? It's the same thing. It still works well, there's no reason to criticize it, but it is fundamentally identical to its predecessor, which, considering the entire game was developed in a year and a half, fair enough, Nintendo. Also, no, I will not be commenting on Goron or Zora Link's moveset. Don't get me wrong, they're fun, but this video is primarily focused on swordplay. The Wind Waker was still basically the same as Ocarina, except for one thing: parry attacks. They're okay. There's no real problem with them. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy seeing Toon Link roll around like the small man he is as much as the next guy, but having to wait for the enemy to strike and then performing one of the two new attacks is hardly game-changing. It's more like the cherry on top of an already well-refined formula. Wind Waker also added the Hurricane Spin, which was kinda cool. Again, not game-changing, but definitely welcome additions. There are, of course, some minor differences between Wind Waker and Ocarina, considering they're entirely different games, but the combat itself hadn't been altered enough to really be considered better until Twilight Princess. This is the cream of the crop. I am not joking when I say this is probably my favorite combat in any 3D Zelda game, and before you ask, no, I have not played Link's crossbow training. Instead of starting with your full moveset, Twilight Princess added unlockable skills to obtain throughout your journey. The ending blow, allowing Link to pierce his enemies when they're down. The shield bash added the ability to daze your enemies before you strike. The mortal draw lets you instantly kill your enemy by attacking once with your sword sheathed. Even the parry attacks return from Wind Waker, except this time you could activate them remotely instead of having to wait. Not to mention, possibly the best feature ever implemented into a mainline Zelda game: you can slash while running. This is actually spectacular, and I wish it was in more Zelda games. It's so natural, you can even charge your slash while running. Beautiful! All of these things, in addition to Link's already existing moveset, creates the most fleshed out combat system in any Zelda game to date. Afterwards, Nintendo realized that they hadn't given fans anything to complain about in a while, and 5 years later, we got Skyward Sword. Regardless of positive or negative reception, this was quite a significant change. All sword motions would now be controlled via the Wii Motion Plus rather than button inputs. There's a wide variety of opinion when it comes to this. Some people loved it and had little to no issues with the calibration. Some people had allegedly terrible experiences with the Wiimote calibrating, and as such, hated it. In addition to an extremely divisive mode of play, Skyward Sword also lost a few of the really cool things added in Twilight Princess. I mean, sure, we still have the ending blow and the shield bash, but we lost the mortal draw and the parry attacks, along with being able to swing your sword while running. Wait, what? No, Nintendo, bring it back! Why did you do this? Overall, I don't hate Skyward Sword's combat. I actually like it. Motion control sword play is a cool concept, but nonetheless, it's no Twilight Princess. This brings us to the most recent mainline installment in the franchise: Breath of the Wild. This one's kind of weird. I mean, yeah, the combat does feel very good. It's the same core concept, but with more significant additions, namely the Flurry Rush, allowing you to enter slow motion when dodging enemy attacks. But there were also a few steps back. For one, the thrust attack was removed entirely for no discernible reason. And no, before you ask, you still cannot slash while running. Now, that doesn't negate this game's combat system. Not at all. It's still a very fun, well-made, and simple system. But there are a few things holding it back for me personally. Despite how admittedly cool and fun flurry rushes are to pull off, They're not the hardest tricks in the world. Simply getting into a groove of dodging a Lionel's attacks will net you a significant amount of damage. Fun, but repetitive. Breath of the Wild also added the ability to parry Guardian Beams using your shield, which makes sense considering Breath of the Wild also added Guardians, but it's still really cool. We also have entirely new weapon classes now. Spears, claymores, axes, and more. It adds a lot of variety, although personally, I think Link was always meant for a good old sword. So, which system works the best? I don't know. If I was forced to choose, then I'd probably have to go with Twilight Princess. But regardless of comparison, they're all very well made. Please let me know what you think in the comments though. It sparks discussion and is just good for the algorithm. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving it a like and subscribing. I had been stressing myself out a little bit during production. I don't know what the issue was, but if you're hearing this right now, I seem to have gotten through it. Also, thank you so much for all the support on the most recent video essay, The Greatest Game Doesn't Exist. That has been astronomical. Thank you all so much for the kind words. All the support has been great, and thank you so much. I make these videos because I want to make them, but you people are also a big part of it too. I want to make what I want to make, but I also want you guys to enjoy it too. All right, signing off. Later.